Melissa Johnson, who worked at a general hospital in Boston, was staring at the clock with a tired expression. 7 p.m. Her shift was over, and tonight she would make it in time to pick up Jake from daycare. Melissa was a single mother living with her 5-year-old son Jake. Her reputation as a nurse was good, and she was trusted by her colleagues, but balancing work and childcare wasn't easy. "Melissa, you can go home now. You did well today," her colleague Carol kindly called out to her. Melissa returned a grateful smile and headed to the locker room. While changing from her uniform into casual clothes, she checked her smartphone. There were 3 missed calls. 2 from her parents, and 1 from her sister Amanda. A call from Amanda was particularly unusual. While driving, Melissa recalled the events of 3 years ago. Her sudden divorce from Brent. One day, he left saying, "I wasn't ready to support a family," and disappeared. For the first few months, he paid child support, but eventually that stopped too. Though she consulted a lawyer, they couldn't locate Brent, and Melissa ended up shouldering everything alone. When she picked up Jake at daycare, his eyes lit up at the sight of his mother. "Mom! I drew a dinosaur today." Jake ran to Melissa, proudly holding up a paper colored in green and brown. Melissa stroked her son's head and promised, "That's wonderful. Let's put it on the refrigerator when we get home." Back at the apartment, Melissa gave Jake a shower and prepared a simple dinner. While watching her son finish eating, she finally decided to respond to the missed calls. First, from her parents. When she answered, her mother Martha's excited voice rang out. "Melissa, have you heard? Amanda got engaged. To a wonderful young man named David Clark. He works at an investment firm in Connecticut. Didn't Amanda call you?" Melissa couldn't hide her surprise. "No, I had a missed call from Amanda, but I haven't called her back yet."
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit Stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
The relationship between Melissa and Amanda was complicated. Her sister Amanda was raised as the apple of their parents' eye. There weren't major problems between them as children, but their relationship deteriorated rapidly when Melissa took a break from college to get pregnant and married. Amanda always criticized Melissa's choices, repeatedly saying, "You could have had a better life." Their parents, Robert and Martha, stood between the two, trying to maintain family peace. After ending the call, Melissa called Amanda. After 3 rings, Amanda's refined voice came through. "Well, Melissa. You finally called back. Congratulations, Amanda. I heard you got engaged." "Yes, thank you. David is truly wonderful. His father is an executive at an investment firm, and they're giving us a condominium in New York's Upper East Side as a wedding gift." Melissa took a deep breath. She was used to Amanda's boasting, but this time she seemed even more proud than usual. "That's lovely. So when's the wedding?" "Next month. We're in a hurry. David's company is planning to transfer him to their London branch." The conversation continued, with Amanda explaining the details of her lavish wedding plans. "And finally," she added, "of course, I'll send you an invitation. But the dress code is strict, so make sure you prepare appropriate attire." Those words implicitly meant, this might be beyond your financial means. A week later, a luxurious invitation arrived at Melissa's apartment. Inside an envelope trimmed with gold foil was an invitation to a wedding at a high-end hotel. However, there was no seating chart included. Feeling anxious, Melissa called Amanda again. "Amanda. Thank you for the invitation." But there was no seating chart. On the other end of the phone, Amanda laughed coldly. "There's no seat for a poor single mother like you. You can stand if you come. Or is it that you don't want guests to think you're part of my family, seeing your appearance?" Melissa was speechless. Her sister's cruel words hurt her heart. "Amanda, I Listen, Melissa. You made your choices. I'm just living my life. Mom and Dad insisted I invite you, so I did. Actually, I'd rather you didn't come. The call was abruptly ended. Melissa collapsed on the sofa and cried. Jake came out of the bedroom and looked at his mother with concern. Mom, are you okay? Melissa wiped away her tears and smiled at her son. I'm fine, Jake. Mommy's just a bit tired. She decided in her heart. She would attend her sister's wedding. For her parents, and more than anything, for her own pride. While embracing her son, Melissa whispered quietly, "We are members of the Johnson family. No one can change that." On the day of the wedding, Melissa was adjusting Jake's bow tie as he got dressed. She checked her appearance in the mirror several times. Her simple navy blue dress was something she had bought a few years ago, but fortunately, it was still wearable. She didn't have expensive jewelry, but a small pearl necklace gifted by her mother adorned her neck elegantly. Mom, do I look handsome? Jake put his hands in his pockets, trying to act like an adult. Melissa smiled and gently stroked his hair. You look very handsome. Don't forget to mind your manners today, as it's a special day. During the taxi ride to the hotel, Melissa's stomach ached with nerves. Despite being invited, she knew she wasn't truly welcome. Nevertheless, she was determined to enter the venue with her chin held high and confidence. Upon arriving at Boston's luxury hotel, Four Seasons, an elegant sign reading, "Clark and Johnson Wedding," was placed at the entrance. Luxury cars lined the surroundings, and doormen welcomed the guests. Melissa took Jake's hand, took a deep breath, and stepped into the hotel lobby. The wedding venue was decorated with luxurious white and gold ornaments. Giant chandeliers shone from the ceiling, and the space, filled with the scent of roses, was already crowded with many guests. Women were dressed in the latest designer dresses, and men wore perfectly tailored tuxedos. Melissa felt a moment of embarrassment about her modest attire but quickly composed herself. Finding her parents at the entrance, her mother Martha rushed over. Melissa, thank you for coming. Jake, can you say hello to Grandma? Jake politely bowed and said, "Hello, Grandma." Robert also approached and kissed Melissa on the cheek. Her parents clearly had apologetic expressions. The seats. As Melissa began to ask, Robert averted his gaze. I thought Amanda would have told you, actually. Martha interrupted her husband. You two can stand near us. We'll be close by. Melissa swallowed her words. She understood that her parents couldn't go against her sister's decision. When the music signaling the start of the ceremony began to play, guests started taking their assigned seats. Melissa and her son stood to the side, watching the ceremony. With the solemn sound of the organ, the groom David Clark took his place at the altar with his best man. His sharp jaw and confident demeanor revealed him to be a successful businessman. David's parents sat in the front row, watching their son with proud expressions. As the wedding march played, the doors to the venue opened. Amanda entered slowly, her hand resting on her father Robert's arm. She was dressed in a pure white designer gown, and a diamond tiara sparkled on her head. Melissa gasped involuntarily. Her sister was truly beautiful. Amanda glanced briefly in Melissa's direction but quickly returned her gaze forward. The cold gesture hurt Melissa's heart, but she didn't show it on her face. The ceremony was conducted solemnly, and David and Amanda exchanged vows of love. Melissa placed her hand on Jake's shoulder, watching the ceremony quietly. Moving to the reception hall, the space was even more luxurious. White rose arrangements adorned the tables, and champagne glasses sparkled. Waiters carried hors d'oeuvres, and bartenders crafted cocktails with elegant movements. When it was time for speeches, David's father stood up first. His speech, beginning with, "To celebrate the union of my son and his beautiful bride," was sophisticated, and guests responded with warm applause. Next, Melissa's father Robert stood up. Though he looked a bit nervous, he prayed for his daughter's happiness with touching words. Amanda, from the day you were born until today, you have brought us joy and pride. David, please cherish our daughter. She is a special person. During Robert's speech, his gaze momentarily turned toward Melissa. There seemed to be sadness and apology in it. Finally, bride Amanda took the microphone. Today, I am experiencing the happiest day of my life. Meeting David and gaining his love is my greatest fortune. We will build a perfect family together. As she said this, Amanda clearly looked in Melissa's direction. Her gaze contained the message, unlike you. Melissa remained motionless, maintaining a smile on her face. When it was time to eat, waiters began bringing out the course meals. Melissa and Jake remained standing. Jake whispered in a small voice, "I'm hungry." Melissa felt a tightness in her chest but gently told him, "Hold on until the cake time. Then we can eat something." A maternal aunt who was nearby noticed their situation and offered them empty seats at her table. However, Amanda gracefully approached and said, "Aunt, those are assigned seats. The Henderson family will be coming later," and left, ignoring Melissa and Jake. The aunt looked at Melissa with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry, Melissa. Amanda has changed recently." Melissa responded maturely. "It's all right, don't worry. We're enjoying the ceremony." Around that time, Melissa noticed her parents having a serious conversation with Amanda. Amanda's expression momentarily became stern, and her parents looked confused. After the conversation ended, her parents avoided making eye contact with Melissa. The reception grew even more glamorous. After the meal, it was time for dancing, and the bride and groom performed their first dance. David and Amanda moved in perfect harmony, like a prince and princess from a fairy tale. When the floor was open to other couples, Melissa's father Robert came to her. "May I have this dance?" Father offered his hand, looking a bit nervous. Melissa was surprised but smiled and accepted. "Jake, Mom is going to dance with Grandpa. Wait here quietly." Jake nodded obediently, looking around with keen interest. On the dance floor, Robert gently led Melissa. He looked straight into his daughter's eyes and said, "Thank you for coming. I apologize for Amanda's attitude. She seems to have lost herself recently." Melissa shook her head. "Don't apologize, Dad. I don't mind." This was a lie. She was deeply hurt. But she didn't want to worry her father. Robert's expression had a shadow as if he had something to say, but when the music ended, he silently escorted Melissa to the edge of the floor and left to dance with Martha. As cake-cutting time approached, waiters brought in a magnificent 6-tier wedding cake. The venue's lighting was slightly dimmed, and spotlights illuminated the cake and the bride and groom gathered around it. Amanda rested her hand on David's arm, smiling happily. The host took the microphone and announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the cake cutting by the bride and groom." David and Amanda held the knife together and began to cut the cake. Flashlights went off, and the venue was filled with applause. Melissa still stood at the edge, watching the scene from afar. She noticed Jake had a curious expression beside her. "What is it, Jake?" He tilted his head and said in a small voice, "I've seen that person before." Melissa followed her son's gaze. Jake wasn't looking at David, but at Amanda. "That person? You mean Aunt Amanda? Of course you know her. She's Mommy's sister." Jake shook his head seriously. "No. Did you know Aunt was with Daddy Brent?" Hearing those words, Melissa almost stopped breathing. "Jake, what are you saying?" She placed her hands on her son's shoulders and looked him in the eyes. "What do you mean?" "I saw them in the park before. On a day you were working. When Grandma took me to the park. Aunt and Daddy Brent were together. They were both laughing." Something began to connect in Melissa's mind. She tried to calm her breathing, but her heart was racing. Some important piece of information was missing. Do you remember when this was? Jake looked up at the ceiling, making a thinking gesture. Before Christmas. It was snowing. Last winter. Melissa traced her memory. Around that time, her parents often took care of Jake, especially when she had night shifts. But Amanda and Brent together. What did it mean? Her thoughts were interrupted by the host's announcement that the bride and groom had begun serving cake to the guests. Amanda and David, smiling happily, started making rounds to the tables. Melissa noticed her parents watching the newlyweds with subtle expressions. Martha bit her lips several times, and Robert had an unnaturally forced smile. Both seemed to be harboring some serious secret. David's parents were also looking at their son and his wife, but especially David's mother's expression seemed to show some concern. She occasionally looked at Amanda and moved her lips as if muttering something. As Melissa looked around, Jake suddenly pulled her hand. "Mom, look. It's cake." Amanda and David had come nearby. When Amanda noticed Melissa, her expression hardened for a moment, but she quickly put on a fake smile. "Melissa, thank you for coming," she said formally. It didn't seem like she was genuinely grateful. David greeted Melissa politely. "You're Amanda's sister. I'm pleased to meet you." He seemed natural in his attitude, apparently unaware that his wife's sister was a single mother. Just as Melissa was about to respond, Jake's eyes lit up at the sight of the cake. David smiled kindly and said, "Would you like a piece?" offering cake to Jake. "Thank you," Jake politely accepted. However, the next moment, he interrupted the adults' conversation by pointing in the direction where Amanda and David were eating cake, saying in a loud voice, "Mom, isn't it funny that the baby in the bride's tummy uses Daddy Brent's words?" Aunt started saying, "Seriously, all the time like Daddy Brent does." For a moment, it was as if all the sound around them had stopped. Melissa's eyes widened, and the color drained from Amanda's face. David looked at his wife with a confused expression. "Baby?" David's voice trembled. "Amanda, what is he talking about?" Amanda desperately tried to smile, saying, "Nothing, just a child's imagination. He's still small and..." But David was already looking down at her abdomen. Amanda's designer dress skillfully concealed her figure, but if one looked carefully, a slightly swollen belly could be noticed. David's complexion changed. "Amanda, are you pregnant?" People nearby stopped their conversations and began looking at the couple. Amanda glared at Jake with a pale face. Her expression mixed anger and fear. Melissa's parents looked at each other and bowed their heads. Their reaction clearly indicated they knew about Amanda's pregnancy. Melissa placed her hand on her son's shoulder, taking a protective stance. In her mind, the puzzle pieces were slowly but surely coming together. Brent and Amanda. The meeting in the park. Amanda's sudden marriage. And the pregnancy. "Amanda, are you pregnant?" Melissa asked in a low voice. Her voice trembled, but it also contained strength. Amanda couldn't answer and bit her lip. David's body began to shake. He grabbed his wife's arm and demanded harshly, "Explain." A moment of silence dominated the venue. Then the next moment, David's father stood up from his seat and walked toward his son. His expression was severe, as if a long-held doubt had turned into certainty. Not only the fact of Amanda's pregnancy but also the question of who the father was now hung in the air. David's father stood before the newlyweds with a dignified posture. His voice was low but resonated to reach every corner of the venue. "Son, I was right. It was no coincidence that I felt something was off about her." David looked at his father and then returned his gaze to Amanda. His face showed a mix of anger and the pain of betrayal. "Are you pregnant, Amanda?" he asked again. "Why didn't you tell me?" Amanda raised her face, desperately trying to maintain composure. I was going to tell you. But after the wedding. I didn't want to ruin our special day. David shook his head. That's not the issue. The issue is. He paused for a moment, searching for words, then said in a hushed voice, the issue is whose child it is. The venue fell silent. Everyone was listening to their conversation. Melissa positioned her son behind her, trying to protect him from the situation. However, Jake was watching with curious eyes. David's mother slowly stood up and stood next to her son. Her expression was severe, looking at Amanda with accusing eyes. You knew about the pregnancy from the premarital health check, yet you kept quiet to David. Mrs. Clark's voice was cold. We heard from the doctor last week. We kept quiet to protect your privacy, but... Amanda's face turned pale. That is... David's expression changed. Wait. I was suspicious about the frequent calls to your phone recently. I also saw the name Brent. He looked at Melissa. That's your ex-husband's name, isn't it? Melissa nodded silently. Her heart was pounding, but she maintained her composure outwardly. Amanda, Melissa quietly called her sister's name. Is the child Brent's? Amanda turned her face away, unable to answer. Her silence told everything. The venue erupted into chaos. Guests looked at each other, starting to whisper. David's relatives showed expressions of anger and shock, while Melissa's distant relatives lowered their gazes in embarrassment. Cornered, Amanda cried out, "The baby is David's." Everyone, don't believe this. However, her voice lacked conviction. Melissa's parents exchanged glances and looked down. Their expressions revealed the truth. David grabbed Amanda's arm and demanded, "Tell the truth." His anger was uncontrollable, but he still maintained his self-control in public. Under David's pressure, Amanda began to tremble. Melissa's father, Robert, finally couldn't stand it anymore and stepped forward. Enough, Robert's voice was tired. Amanda, you can't keep hiding it. Martha also stood next to her husband, nodding with tears in her eyes. Melissa, I'm sorry, Robert looked straight into his daughter's eyes. We knew about Amanda and Brent's relationship since last year. That divorce too. Stop. Amanda shouted. Dad, be quiet. But Robert continued. Brent and Amanda had been meeting secretly for over a year. Melissa, that was the true cause of your divorce. He covered his face with his hands, choking on his words. Martha began speaking in her husband's place. When we found out about their relationship, we tried to persuade them to break up. But Amanda wouldn't listen. And while her relationship with Brent continued, she also started dating David. We couldn't stop her. Melissa closed her eyes. It felt like her world was shaking. The truth about her divorce from Brent. Her sister's betrayal. And the fact that her parents knew but didn't tell her the truth. All of it overwhelmed her. Melissa, I'm sorry, Martha said, crying. We didn't want to hurt you. But by keeping it hidden, we hurt you even more. David was stunned. His eyes showed colors of anger and humiliation. So you were involved with two men, and while pregnant with one of their children, you were trying to marry me? Amanda was crying. Her makeup had smeared, and her beautiful bride image had turned into a miserable sight. David, please. You said you loved me. This child is. David interrupted her words. Lies. It was all lies. With a trembling hand, he pulled off his wedding ring and threw it on the floor. The ring made a cold sound as it rolled across the marble floor. He turned to his parents and said, "Let's go." The Clark family members stood up all at once and began to leave the venue. Other guests were also disturbed and started leaving their seats one after another. Only the Johnson family and a few relatives remained in the venue. Amanda had collapsed on the floor and continued crying. Melissa quietly approached Amanda. "Why?" she simply asked. "Why, with Brent?" Amanda looked up. Her eyes burned with hatred and resentment. "It's all your fault. Because you couldn't make Brent happy, he came to me." Melissa was hurt by those words but didn't lose her composure. "It was you who excluded me, stole my husband, all of it. Today's events are the result of your actions." Melissa stopped in front of her parents. They were looking down, seemingly ashamed. "Dad, Mom," Melissa's voice was gentle but contained a firm will. "Today, I learned many things. About my family, and about myself too. There's a lot we need to talk about, but that's enough for today." Melissa quietly took her son's hand and said, "Let's go home," preparing to leave. At that moment, her parents stopped her. "Melissa, please let us talk," her father pleaded. After a deep sigh, Melissa said, "That's enough for today. Another time," and left the venue with her son. 3 weeks later, Melissa answered yet another call from her parents. Eager to tell the truth, they requested a meeting at a cafe. Though hesitant, Melissa agreed. At a small cafe in Boston, she sat facing her parents. Robert and Martha looked aged, and it was evident that the events of the past few weeks had worn them out. "Brent and Amanda's relationship began more than a year ago," Robert quietly began. "We found out by chance. A friend witnessed them having an intimate dinner at a restaurant." "Why did you keep quiet?" Melissa's voice was calm, but deep wounds were visible in her eyes. Martha held her coffee cup with trembling hands. "We wanted to preserve the family bond. At first, we tried to persuade Amanda. But she wouldn't listen. And then..." She closed her eyes for a moment as if fighting back tears. "We thought Amanda would marry Brent. After he divorced you, we thought they would be together. But Brent ran away from responsibility, and Amanda was at a loss. So she sought salvation in David." Melissa looked at her parents with a deeply hurt expression. "Family bond? Weren't Jake and I family? Why didn't you tell me the truth?" Robert covered his face with his hands. "We were wrong. In trying to protect you, we ended up hurting you. Please forgive us." Melissa left the cafe without uttering words of forgiveness. However, a small seed of understanding began to grow in her heart. Perhaps her parents too were victims who had been manipulated by Amanda's actions. 3 months later, Melissa was promoted at the hospital and moved to a better apartment with Jake. Although her relationship with her parents was still delicate, she allowed weekend visits for Jake's sake. Amanda was completely isolated and was living with her parents. Her marriage to David was annulled, and legal proceedings were underway. Brent, too, had left town to escape responsibility. As autumn deepened, Amanda gave birth to a boy. Ironically, having become the same as the sister she once looked down upon, she felt the weight of her mistakes daily. 6 months after the wedding, one evening, the doorbell rang at Melissa's apartment. Opening the door, there stood Amanda holding a baby. Her face was thin, and dark circles of fatigue were prominent under her eyes. Her former beauty had faded, and there stood the realistic figure of a young mother. "Melissa." Amanda's voice trembled. "Could you listen to me, just for a little while?" Melissa hesitated for a moment, but seeing the baby dozing in her sister's arms, she quietly opened the door. Amanda entered silently and sat on the sofa. "Melissa, I'm truly sorry for trying to ruin your life," Amanda said tearfully. "I know it's unforgivable. But this child is Jake's brother. They're innocent." After a long silence, Melissa approached the baby and looked at its tiny face. The infant indeed had traces of Brent. But what welled up in her heart wasn't anger, but a strange affection. "What's his name?" Melissa quietly asked. "Robert," I named him after Dad, Amanda answered. Melissa smiled gently and said, how about some tea? It seems like we have a long talk ahead. As she brought tea from the kitchen, she saw Jake's bedroom door open. Her son was peering into the living room with curious eyes. Jake, come here. There's someone I want you to meet, Melissa called gently. Jake approached shyly and stared at the baby in Amanda's arms. Is this my new cousin? He asked. Melissa and Amanda exchanged glances, at a loss for words in the face of the bitter reality. However, Jake's innocent curiosity eased the heavy atmosphere. He's your brother, Jake, Melissa said quietly. Family can be complicated sometimes. But what's important is that we care for each other. Amanda cried at Melissa's words. She hadn't expected such generosity from her sister. I didn't have your strength, she admitted in a small voice. I was jealous of you. Melissa was surprised. Of me? You've always carved your own path. I've always chosen the easy way. The two talked late into the night. Not all past wounds and anger were healed, but a new understanding and respect began to sprout. The sight of the two, looking anew at the meaning of true family, signaled the beginning of a new chapter.